So we're on the top of Yud Gimel Amud Aleph. We said in the Mishnah, it's a traklin, it's a myron, different types of. We talked about different kinds of properties. A traklin is a room or a room in a palace or part of a palace. It's not divisible. If you're going to try to divide it up in two, so we said in our Mishnah that there's no din of you can't you don't make a wall in between them. Zaktumar. So we said in the Mishnah, if it's Ein Kadei Lazeh, Kadei Lazeh, if there's not enough for each one of them, then you don't divide it up and build a wall. So Mahu. Zaktumar. Ein Kadei Lazeh, Kadei Lazeh Mahu. What does that mean? What do you do in that case? So they're not able to force each other to split up the property. Yehuda says, okay, so they can't split up a property. The property is not large enough to be made into two separate properties. Yehuda says there's another option. In the end, they want to be one of them wants to be out of the shutvis. So you could say either you set a price. There's different ways to determine who's the one who says it. But he says, either you state a price and I'll choose whether to accept that price, or I'll state a price and you'll choose whether to pay for it or not. So they could choose not to divide the property, but either buy me out or you buy me, either you buy me out or I'll buy you out. Right? It's not a divisible property. You can't divide up the property, but you could pay. One of them could pay the other one to buy out his share. So that's Rabbi Yehuda Shita. There is such a din that a property that's too small to be divided up, or for whatever reason, it's not something that can be divided up, you can say, buy me out or I'll buy you. Nachman Amar, less dina de gudoyaga. Nachman says, no, there's no such din. You can't force someone, if he's in a shutvis, you can't say, I want out of the shutvis. As long as it's, right, let's do the classic case of the Mishnah. If you have a property that's 6 amas wide, 6 amas by 4 amas, so that's big enough to cultivate as a vegetable patch. So he says, listen, I'm not interested. It's every year I get my tomatoes out of this vegetable patch. I'm happy with that. And I'm not interested in buying you out, and I'm not interested in you buying me out. So that's Rav Nachman Shita. Rav Nachman Shita says no such thing. No, you can't force someone to buy out just because it can't be divided. Amalei Rav Nachman. Lidi Dachta Amrit less dinner the good ayag. Rav said to Rav Nachman, if you hold there's no such din that one partner can force the other partner to buy him out or be bought out. B'charu pat upashat. You have two brothers. One who's a b'char, so he gets a double share, and the other brother is a pashat. He gets one share. The father left for them an eved, eved knani, and a behemoth tmeya, So both of these things, both an eved and a behemoth tmeya, are things that cannot be divided. Obviously, you can't cut an eved in half, and a behemoth tmeya, a behemoth that's not edible, you can't shecht it and divide up the meat. So you don't have the option. It's similar to a property that's less than Dalet Amas for each one. It's not able to be physically divided. So what should you do? Amalei shani ayme shnei yam. He said to him, so it's going to be. So he said. So it's a case of Oysen, it's supposed to be the raya. So the question is, according to Rav Nachman, since you can't do good ayah, if you can't say buy me out or I don't buy or I buy you out, what are you going to do? His assumption was this is a kasha of Rav Nachman because it didn't seem to him to be so practical that let's say the eved or the animal worked 2 days for one and 1 day for the other. it's going to be an unequal amount of days. You're going to have it for here and there. It's not what to do one day each. That seems more practical. You're going to have he'll have one day every day. He'll switch back and forth. You do 2 day to one and then 1 day to the other, an unequal amount. It's not going to be comfortable for anyone. So how are you supposed to share it? So Dr. Gemara, Amalei, Nachman said, no, it's not such a big deal. Nachman says, it's not the greatest, it's not the best plan, but since there is no din of buying out, that's what you got to do. One is going to have to take it for 1 day, and the other one's going to have to take it for 2 days. Meisve. Now the Gemara asks on Rabbi Yehuda, who holds Isdina the Gin of Gurayag. We're in the middle of your Gimel Amanal. So Menachem, the rule is that what we're talking about is the din of Gurayag. We said in the Mishnah, sorry. The problem is that I automatically get my WhatsApp messages on my laptop, so I see them. It's distracting. So we said in the Mishnah, right, that if you have a property, we had the Gemara before this that says if you have a property that's too small or of a character of a type of thing that's unable to be physically divided, there's no din that one partner can force the other one to cut it in half, because then neither's going to be left with a workable amount. So then we brought a machlekes in this Gemara, whether you can say, rather than dividing the object or the property physically, can one partner say to the other one, good, all good. Either I'll buy you out, or you'll buy me out. So Yehuda says there is such a din, one can buy out on a property that's too small to be divided. And Nachman said, no, there's no such din, there's no such right. So we're up to Meisvei, about 10 lines down on you give me someone who's half an Eved and half a Ben Chayr, right? So it's typical case. He started out being owned by Shutfin, and one Shutf freed his portion of the Eved, an Eved Knani. So part of him is an Eved, and part of him is free. He works for his owner one day. It's Atzma Yemechad. Divrei Beisil. Beisil says he works that you just keep it in that status, and he splits his time. Beishamai says Tekantam is Rabbi, it's Atzma Le Tekantam. You fixed. It's good for his master. His master gets someone to work for him, but this is the problem. It's Atzma Le Tekantam. It's not tenable for him to continue working for half the time for his master and half the time to be free. Why? There's a separate problem. Lisa Shiftani Yachal, he can't marry a Shifcha because he's half free. A Ben Chayrin, someone who's a free man, is not allowed to marry a Shifcha Knanis. Lisa Bas Chayrin Yachal, he can't marry a free woman because half of him is Eved. Yivatal, so what? He should not marry anyone. Even for a Eved Knani, there's halacha that the Torah was created for people to reproduce. It's the world was only created in order to be populated. So it can't be continue in a status where he's unable to marry. We force the master who owns half of this Eved to free him, because it's and the Eved who received his freedom has to write a shtar saying that he owes him the money. An Eved doesn't own anything for himself, so he has to write him a shtar that he's going to pay him for half of his value that the master freed him in order to enable him to marry. V'chazru Beis Hillel l'hayris k'divrei Beis Shammai, and in the end, Beis Hillel acquiesced to Beis Shammai's shita. He said, "You're right. It is le'sayuv ra l'sheves yitzra. You can't keep someone as chatzi eved chatzi ben chayrin. That and therefore you have to free him, and he'll have to pay him in the end. But if we didn't have this problem, They both agree, both Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, says without this problem that the Chatzi Eved wasn't able to marry, the Eved would not have had the ability to force the Adon to free him. So you see, not like Rabbi Yehuda, there is no din of Gurei Agad. Why do we have to say that the only reason why the Eved could force him to free him, could force his master to free him, is because of the problem that he can't marry? Let's say he just has a general din that anytime there's a partnership that's half and half, and it's not workable. You can't split the two halves and say you keep your half and I keep my half. Why can't he say I want to split it up? So Gemara, I want to split it up. I want to either you buy me out or I'll buy you out. So Gemara Shani Hacha the Ogad Ikka good luck. Gemara says over here, the point, in order to do a good ayagid, in order to say, I want you to either buy me out or I'll buy you out, that is only the way it technically works is that the one who is asking to buy out, he has to give the other person the option. Right? You could either be the one to set the price and I'll choose whether I want to do it, or you can tell me I should set the price and you'll choose whether you want to accept that price. But it has to be that he's saying either one of us could buy out the other. But in the case of an Eved, Chatzi Shifcha, there's no option for the master to buy out the Eved's half. Someone who is Chatzi ben Chayrin cannot become a full Eved. That's so once someone is, there's no such thing as a Yid becoming Eved Knani. And even half a Yid can't become an Eved Knani. So he's just saying, when the Eved is saying essentially is, you have to let me buy you out. Whoever's going to set the price, but it's only half of good ayagid. Like we're saying, all good ikka, he's saying, I will buy you out, but he's not saying, oh, good, or you will buy me out. He's not saying you will buy me out because there's no such option. So therefore, even Rabbi Yehuda agrees that there's no din of good, just good, where I'll buy you out, but you don't give an option for the other person to buy you out as well. Tashma. Fact to Gemara. Shnei Achen, another question on the din of good ayagid. Shnei Achen, Echad Ani ve'Echad Asher. Two brothers, one is an Ani and one is an Asher. Ben Yechlan Avi and Merchatz u'Beis Habat. The father left over for them a bathhouse or a olive press. So, Asim l'schar haschar le'emtza. If it's a commercial enterprise that it produces profit, so you divide up the profit. Asim la'atzmai, but if it's not a commercial enterprise, but rather it's for the father's personal use, it's not something that produces money. So an ani has no use for these things. An ani doesn't have olives, and he doesn't have olives, and he doesn't go to the bathhouse. He's not a fancy man, so he has no need for it. Hari asher aimel ani kachel choavad v'yirchatzu b'mechatz kachel zeisim b'boav asa v'eisabad. Even so, the wealthy son can say, listen, we're keeping these things and you could use them. He knows that he's not going to be able to use them, but he says we're keeping it. It's like, he has a house upstate and this poor guy has to schlep every day into work, and his wife is also working in the city. His two brothers, and the father died. He left over the upstate, in Park Slope or in Lakeview, and one brother says, "Okay, I have an easy job. I'll come up in the summers, and I'll take half the summer, you take the other half." So the other brother says, "Listen, I can't make use of it. I got to work every day." And the first brother says, "Okay, listen, if it's going to sit empty, it'll sit empty. It's up to you." So we see that for the fact that the wealthy brother can say that, vice versa, that the other brother can say, okay, so let's do a buyout. Either you take it for yourself. Obviously, I'm not taking it for myself, but you could take it. You could take it for yourself and pay me for the amount. So tomorrow we have the same problem like we said before. Hasanami good ikka, al good leka. It's not a practical option for the ani to buy out the others. We'll just be left with double the problem of a place he can't use. And again, we're talking about where it's not commercially viable. You can't rent it out to someone else. It's one of these places in the mountains where he says where the rule is you're not allowed to rent it out. So he's just he has it's only he's the poor brother is only offering to let the other buy him out. The whole process doesn't work, right? Because the whole process is one person sets the price and it gives the other one the option to either pay it, buy it out, or let me buy it out. So in this case, let's say the rich brother will say, okay, I'll set a price. I'll set a price for $100, even though it's worth $500. And I know the other brother is not going to bid on it. He's not going to take that option. So you don't have the process doesn't work where one of the parties is unable to make use of it. Toshma. Now we're going to bring a riot to the din of Gurayah. Kol sheyichalek u'shmaya olav cholken. Anything that you could, like we said in the Mishnah, and the Mishnah said, how do we know what's something that's divisible? If you divide it up, each portion will retain its name. If one person wants to get out, you divide it up in half. In lav, you pay him money. You could pay money to make up the difference. So this is a raya to Rav Nachman. You see, it was saying that one person can, if you divide it up, you say good or yagid. So l'chayra we have a brisa like Rav Nachman, like Rav Yehuda who says good or yagid. So what does Rav Nachman say that there's no such din of good or yagid? So Gemara Tanohi, it's machlekes katanoim. The Tani, toil ato shir, ba'ani pachas, shaymelay. If you had something that that was too small, let's say the example that we had of where we said that a property less than 4x4 is useless. So if you had a property, let's say 6 amas by 4 amas, so if you divide it in half, you'd have 3 amas by 4 amas. Then neither piece of property would be viable. So that's the case where we say you can't be chaylik. So what happened if he said, Ruvain said to Shimon, we have a 6x4 amma property. I'll tell you what, you take 4x4 and I'll take the other 2x4 and you'll pay me back the difference. You'll pay me, you got an extra 2x4. So let's say the whole thing is worth $90. So you got 2/3 of the property and I only got 1/3. So you have to pay me the extra $15 that I was really supposed to get to make up for the fact that you got a bigger piece. So he wants to get around the problem of that it's too small to be chalik. He says, "What's your problem? You don't want to get something that's not viable. You're ending up with something viable. You just have to pay me for the rest." So Shaimallah, you listen to him. Well, I should leave a part. Let's put on the side that whether he has to compensate him for the rest of it. If Shimon Gamliel ain't Shaimallah. Shimon Gamliel says you don't listen to him. If it's exactly as we said, that he said, I'll take less than my share, and you take a full share, something that's viable, big enough of dollar al dollar, my time to Rav Shimon Gamliel. Why would Rav Shimon Gamliel possibly say that if Ruvain is offering to Shimon, you take 4x4, why was Shimon's not losing out? He's having a viable piece of property, and Ruvain's taking the loss if he's taking less. If he says you take your chela and I'll take less, then you listen to it. Good, all good nami shaymin. It must be, he said. And if he says, rather than saying this, he said, I'm not offering to give you more than your share, but I'm going to offer that either you buy me out or I'll buy you out. You also listen. And Rav Shimon Gamliel is coming to say, you don't listen. So Rav Shimon Gamliel would be the Tana who doesn't hold of good or yagid, even though we brought up before, even though we brought a raya before from a Tana that says in lav malanoy say b'dam that you do say good or yagid, but now we have Shimon Gamliel who says you don't say good or yagid. No, it's not true. We don't have to force into this brisa that it's talking about the din of Gura Yagud, and therefore say Reb Shimon Gamliel is saying we don't hold Gura Yagud. It's talking about, like we originally said, with one person, Reuven is saying to the other, to his Shimon, that you take a full share, enough of a viable portion, and leave me with a smaller amount. With the Ka'amrit, my time to Reb Shimon Gamliel, why Reb Shimon Gamliel dispute this? Mishum da'amalei, ibidmi, ibidmei, leslie, dmei, lemeisalach. If we're talking about what Reuven is saying, I want to be compensated for taking, I'm offering to take less. I'm only going to get 2 amas and you're going to get 4 amas. And therefore, I want you to pay to make up for the discrepancy. And Shimon says to him, listen, you're telling me to give it to you, to take it, divide it in half, and I'm going to have to pay you for taking more. I don't have the money for it. I can't afford it. And if you want to say that I'm not going to, you're not going to force me to pay for it, I'm not interested in taking a gift. It's a very reasonable thing, right? A person doesn't want, I don't want to be beholden. I don't want my brother to do me a favor. I'm not interested in taking gifts. I'd rather just leave it the way it is. We own the whole thing, b'shutvis, and we continue to work it, and then we sell it and we divide up the money. So this is not a raya of a Tana that Rosh Gamliel is chaylik on Gura Yagid. It's just simply a case of, we're not talking about a Gura Yagid, we're talking about where he's trying to divide it up non-symmetrically, and the other brother, according to Rosh Gamliel, can object. Amalei Abayel Rabbi Yosef. Hadir Rabbi Yehuda de Shmueli. There is another man, the Amar, who holds like Rabbi Yehuda, who holds there is a din of Gura Yagid. The Tanan. The Kisvei HaKodesh, Avo Bisha Shneim Roitzim Lo Yachleku. We ended off in the end of our Mishnah that even though you can divide everything that could be divided, if they both agree to divide it, you divide it even if it's less than the share of division, right? The whole reason why you can't divide something that's too small is because each part is not usable. But if the 2 parties agree and they agree to divide, there's no problem. But this doesn't hold true by Kisvei HaKodesh, because it's not Bakavidik to divide up a sefer and cut it in half. This is all talking about where it's a single, they made it into one single scroll. But if you have 2 separate scrolls that like a part of a set, like you have a different, one had let's say Nevi'im and the other one had Ksuvim in it. We can see it's a machlokes later on whether you could do that. But if you had such a thing, but then you could be chaylik, then you could divide it in half. Less dina de Gura Yagid. Why are we saying it's only b'krach echad that one could force the other to divide? Afilu b'shnei krachim nami. Even by 2 krachim, how could one force the other one to divide it? L'chayra, the 2 things are worth different amounts, and there's going to have to be compensation paid. Tigun Risham v'shneim roitzim. When it says no, what are you talking about? This is not a din of Gura Yagid. We're talking about over here the question of, we said that you can't divide two krachin of, if it's part of the same thing, you can't divide it because it's not bakavidik. So we're just talking about the din, talking about they both agree to do it. We're not talking about Gura Yagid, one is forcing the other one's hands. We're saying a din that if you have 2 separate, if you have a part of a set of divrei of kisvei kodesh, that in that case they're allowed to make up amongst themselves to divide it up. And if it's 2 separate scrolls, there's no problem of covered of kisvei kodesh. Amar Ameme, Helchasa is din of the Gura Yagid. Halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, that there is a din of Gura Yagid. Like we said before, we brought a raya, there was a brisa that paskin like Rabbi Yehuda. Amar Ravashi Lamema, Hadam Rav Nachman Mai. What about the sheet of Rav Nachman? Amalei Leishmielei. I didn't hear of it. Claim He didn't want to say it. What he really meant to say is, I don't know like Rav Nachman. I paskin not like him. So he said Leishmielei. I didn't hear it. I don't know what you're talking about. Just avoided discussing the fact that he's paskin not or not. Is it true that we don't paskin like Rav Nachman, and we do paskin? There is a din of Gura Yagid. Rabbi Bar Chanina, Rav Dima Bar Chanina, Shavak lavua tarti amasa. He left over two maidservants. Chadi yada afiyo b'shuli, one who had to cook and to bake. Chadi yada pilcha v'navla, another one knew how to work with cloth, with thread, to spin it and to make it into cloth. Also, rava. So they had to. How do you divide it up? They each have different values. One is more valuable than the other. How do we divide it up? Also, less din of the good ayagid. There's no din of good ayagid. You can't say one brother can't force the other one to pay up and to buy him out. So l'chayr we're seeing not like we see like Rav Nachman, not like Rav Yehuda. So Gemara no shani hasam. The lamar mi b'yalei travay, lamar mi b'yalei travay. So ki kamale shkolat chadav anachadav lav good ayagid. Over here, there's no din of good ayagid because each one has different skills. So we're not saying buy out. There's a reason why each partner would say, "I want to keep my half." The reason why they're each indivisible on their own, and each one has skills that the owner wants, the current shutuf wants. So he says, "I want to have a chelik in each one." So you're saying buy out them because they're indivisible, but I prefer to keep it in the way it is right now, that I'm getting something from each part. Yeah, so it's not, so this is not a case of good ayagud, and therefore even Rabbi Yehuda holds that there is a din of good ayagud. That's talking about with this one uniform thing that he's saying buy me out or not. But in this case, he doesn't have to do so. Are you saying, is it really true that there's no din of good ayagud when we're talking about two separate things that each one has different values? But Kisvei HaKadosh Travayu Mibayalahu. Again, the Kisvei HaKadosh, right? We had two separate, let's say, Nevi'im and Ksuvim, which were in two separate scrolls. We said everyone agrees that you could divide it up of Vishnei Shvich and Chalkin. We said you could divide it up if it's two separate things. So tomorrow, no, we already answered that. Over there, we weren't talking about a din of whether you could say good over yogurt. The question over there was whether you could divide up something, whether you could divide up Kisvei Kodesh, or is it B'zoyim for the Kisvei Kodesh? It wasn't a question of good or yogurt because we were both agreeing that they wanted to do it. So now that we brought up this issue of dividing up Kisvei Kodesh, the Gemara talks about that a little bit. Tanarabah. Madlik Adam Torah Nevi'im Uksuvim Ke'echad. Divrei Reb Meir. Reb Meir says you can put together, you can make like we have. I mean, if you know the big green art scroll that has the Chumash and Nevi'im and Ksuvim, has all Kisvei Kodesh, the entire Nevi'im and Ksuvim all together. Divrei Reb Meir. Reb Yehuda Aimer Torah b'fnei atzma, Nevi'im b'fnei atzma, Ksuvim b'fnei atzma. You can put together the whole Chumash, and you can put together the whole Nevi'im, and you can put together the whole Ksuvim, but they can't all be put together. There's a chashash that people will misunderstand. They'll think that Nevi'im, things that were said by Nevi'im, were part of the Torah, the Chamishi Chumshei Torah. And as we know, we don't bring halacha from Nevi'im and Ksuvim. They have different statuses. And we don't want people to confuse it. We'll that over time, they're all put together into one scroll. It's not like nowadays that we have printed from. Everything was a scroll. So if everything was a scroll, you had a scroll that went straight from Chumash into Nevi'im, and from Nevi'im into Ksuvim. They would think it was all written by one, maybe the same way that the Nevi'im were written by Nevi'im. Maybe someone Chas v'Shalom would think the Chumash was written by Nevi'im. The Chum say not only can't you put together the entire sefer of Nevi'im together with all the Ksuvim, you have to put each Navi, each single Navi, like Yeshua has to be by itself, and Malachim has to be by itself, and Shmuel has to be by itself. Each one has to be separate, because we don't want anyone to confuse who wrote one. You might think it's all written by a single Navi. Rabbi Yehuda, Ma'aseh b'bitis ben Zayin, Shehelo Shmoyne Nevi'im Nubakim ke'echad al pi Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. He had, according to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, he said you could have all the Shemayim Nevi'im together. So this is like either one of the first two shitas, but not like the last one, not like the Chachamim who said you can't put together. And obviously it's this would be like either the first two pshakim. And there's another version of this that said that that he had each one of the Nevi'im. What was it? The Ksuvim? Yeah, he had all the Nevi'im, each one separately, like the Chacham. That says each one has to be by itself. Amr Rabbi Ma'aser v'yil l'fneinu Torah Nevi'im Ksuvim de'welchem ke'echad b'chshirunam. Like Rav Meir said, you could put all of everything together. What happens when you have such a thing? Bein chumash u'chumash al Torah arba shitin. When you, according to the first two shitas, you're allowed to have the entire chumash and Nevi'im and Ksuvim together. Each one could be together, either all of them together in one sefer, or each one Torah by itself and Nevi'im by itself and Ksuvim by itself. So what each chumash between Bereshis and Shemais, you have to have arba shit, and you have to have 4 lines empty. V'chein bein kol navi lenavi, and so similarly between each navi to another navi. U'benavi shel shnei masar, and then trei asar, which is like a subdivision of 12 small nevi'im. Gimel shitin, you have 3 in between each one of the trei asar. When you come to the end of the page, then you stop at the bottom and you start at the end of the next page. Okay, we're going to stop over here. We'll continue with this tomorrow. Shkayach. Enjoy.
Have a good day.
Have a good day.
Thank you. Go.